on just about enough seats, and we want to be respectful of your time. I'm Regina Horton-Lewis, and I'm chair of Coatesville Area Partners for Progress and one of the co-chairs of the Second Century Alliance. And before we get started, I just want to acknowledge, first I want to thank Gil Pierce. He's running around because he's taking good care of us. But I want to thank the Senior Center for hosting this. This is a lovely facility for these kinds of things and other things that go on here all the time. It's a great, great facility. So we thank them for allowing us to be here this evening. Also, I want to welcome many of our elected officials. You want to introduce yourself?
Donald Folks, Second Ward City Council.
Don't try to hide.
Debbie Bookman, City Council at large.
And Linda's here.
Linda Lavender Norris, City Council President, 5th Ward Representative.
Anybody else? I don't want to overlook anyone. Any other elected officials? All right. I also want to acknowledge any of our steering committee members if they're here. And I know we have one or two of our steering committee, Kaya, Tamika. Okay, great. And I'll acknowledge Pat Bachman's and Pat is from the Chester County Department of Community Development. Did I get it right?
Right on.
All right. Okay. Yeah. We're going to start out by giving you some background and tell you a little bit of how we got to this point. And then I'll come back after Sunny and we will talk about the partnerships that we've established along the way, what some of the outcomes are that we hope to achieve, and next steps. So, Sunny, you want to?
Thank you. All right, thank you. So I'm Sonia Hunsinger. I go by Sunny. I'm the Economic Development Administrator for the Second Century Alliance here in Coatesville. And I've been a part of this Wells Fargo Regional Foundation initiative since I got here a little over 2 years ago. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background for those of you who aren't familiar with the whole process and how we got to where we are today. So can everybody hear me? I've been told I have a big mouth. So back in 2015, the Chester County Economic Development Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm of the Chester County Economic Development Council, joined forces with Coatesville Area Partners for Progress to secure a planning grant from the Wells Fargo Regional Foundation. And the purpose of this planning grant was to go into the neighborhoods and do a deep dive into what the challenges our neighbors were facing, and really better understand the neighborhoods and the neighbors and their families. Throughout that planning process in 2017, we held public meetings and stakeholder interviews, and we surveyed over 300 residents, one-on-one, 10-page surveys, again, digging really deep into the detail and the data. And there were 4 common threads that we kept hearing over and over again. They were resident engagement, public safety, jobs and economic opportunity, and programs for the youth. So we convened work groups around each one of these 4 topics. And those work groups were comprised of the residents and professionals in each one of those topic areas. And together, those groups came up with strategies to address and overcome the challenges they faced, that they identified that they were facing in their neighborhoods. So those strategies are outlined in the spreadsheets on your table. They have target dates alongside them, 5-year target dates. And this is an abbreviated version of what we use to go back to the Wells Fargo Regional Foundation and say, Okay, we did all the planning, we pulled all the data, we interviewed all the residents and stakeholders. Now we're going to need some funding for implementation. We have the strategies, now we're going to need some support to actually implement them. So we went back to Wells Fargo last year, and just last week, 2 weeks ago, we were awarded a 5-year grant to help us implement the strategies that the residents had come up with. So this is our roadmap for the next 5 years. The funding will allow us to hire a community organizer that's going to go into each one of the neighborhoods in the city and work alongside the residents to actually implement the strategies that they came up with through the planning process. So that's how we got to where we are today. And we'll answer any questions at the end of the presentation. But I wanted Regina to kind of go over what the outcomes we anticipate for this after the 5-year process of the implementation.
Thanks, honey. And I think we might have some of these out there on the table. In the various areas, especially around resident engagement, there's the idea that we might hold, if certain neighborhoods feel that they would like to do this, that we could hold some festive events to bring Coatesville residents together. And it's interesting, I was thinking today when I was looking this over, that just this month and in August, in July and August, we have had and are having a number of community events. But it's always good to bring the community together. One of the things that I heard from people when I was going door to door was that, Regina, I'd like to tell you more about my neighbors, but I don't necessarily know my neighbors that well. And in some neighborhoods, there's transition that takes place, and people just don't get connected as we used to. Provide some effective communication and marketing of existing programs and services. This comes out everywhere we go. I was at a meeting a week or so ago, and people were talking about what they need. And I was sitting there only because I work in the social service arena. Could I, in my mind, say, oh, there's something to really address that? Or there's a program that would be helpful to you, but not everybody gets that information and knows it. Establish some neighborhood associations. That could be an effective way to help with a number of things, including public safety. Expand home ownership, which is a goal that we've had in this community for a long time. Although I realize that people's needs are changing in that arena. I'm getting older, and frankly, I'm not so sure I want to own a home anymore. I might like to do something different. So things change as conditions change and as your circumstances change. But we know that home ownership helps to stabilize communities without a doubt. We want to, in the area of jobs and economic development, develop understanding and respect for behaviors necessary for effective workforce experience. We have in this county a very strong workforce program, and making it more effective for our residents is very important. Address some community difficulties with mass transit, and we've been talking about transportation for as long as I've been in Coatesville, which is over 20 years. Support local entrepreneurs to start and maintain businesses. And in the youth empowerment area, and I have to say this as I start, I think that Coatesville probably has one of the most active networks of organizations that work with numerous youth in our community. We have a lot of programs for our youth, and I would put Coatesville up against any community in Chester County and say that. So we want to increase awareness about those youth-related services and strengthen relationships among existing providers and expand services. I've listened to a number of people, including Kaya Scott, who's been in many of our meetings, and They'll talk about the things that they are doing and how they wish they had the resources to do more. And we all know that that's much needed. And so securing funding for feasibility studies and for the kinds of things that can improve our services for our youth. We want to increase the number of eyes and ears that watch over our community. And to some degree, that means, come right on up. Yeah, you can sit there. It means that we are purposefully, sometimes we see things, but we don't see things, and we don't react. I came out of our building at the Brandywine Health Center the other day, and I realized that there were bicycles stashed away in an unusual place as I was getting in my car. And I'm tired, it's the end of the day, I'm climbing in the car. When I get home, I'm rattling this around. Why were those bikes there? I'm looking around, I don't see a single solitary soul anywhere. And the next day I came in and I told some people at the office that I had seen that, and they reminded me of some things that had been going on in the area that I should have been more in tune to. But I wasn't purposefully thinking about that. So I overlooked it. So oftentimes when things happen in our community, we come back and say, did you see anything? We go, no, I didn't see anything. But when you really are thinking in that way, you begin to see things. Increased community accountability for crime and nuisance behaviors. And I have to say, I think we have one of the best police chiefs around as well. And we've had a lot of improvement in that arena. Promote positive relationships between the police and the residents, and help maintain a public environment that deters illicit activity and ensures resident safety. So those are the types of things that came out of the study that we'd like to see some concrete outcomes come out of as we move along. And these are not in concrete, because as we work with different neighborhoods, they may see things differently. And that's the whole point. Localize our efforts. Go back to where I'm supposed to be. And I want to say that fostering civic engagement is not an afterthought. If we don't get connected, we aren't going to be successful at what we're trying to accomplish. So I'll turn it back over to you, Sonny, and you can talk about the next steps for hiring a community organizer.
Great, thank you. So a lot of this is going to be about fostering the relationships with the residents in the neighborhood. So it's not about this community organizer coming in and doing this in a vacuum or by themselves or for the city or for the neighborhoods. This community organizer will be working alongside the residents and with the residents, empowering them, bringing resources to bear, bringing tools and those resources that will facilitate the implementation of these strategies at the neighborhood level. So the process is this. We're working right now on the job description, and we hope to have the job posted by the middle of next week, hopefully by August 15th. And as far as I can tell, we'll have about 3 to 4 weeks of an open call. And then through September, through the end of September, we'll be doing the candidate interviews and all of that stuff. And we're hoping that by early to mid-October, we will have this person on board. So, at your tables, you have some sign-in sheets. And there's also on your table a map of the city with some circles on it that kind of identify some of the neighborhoods in the city. And what I'd like you to do is write down next to your name what neighborhood you identify with. So it could be where you live, it could be where you work, it could be where you patronize a park or a public space. If there are multiple, list them. If there aren't any, just put that in the remarks, or just make that remark in there as well. You don't have a map. grab that one. There should be a couple on each table. Just one. You can share. We'll pass those back. Sorry about that. So we'll get those back. But the idea is that once we have this person on board, they will be able to contact you at that neighborhood level in the hopes of starting these smaller, intimate neighborhood get-togethers. So we'll continue to keep you abreast of what's going on from the Growing Greater Facebook page and the Growing Greater e-news and website. We want to be able to get into those neighborhoods and start meeting as smaller groups so that we can identify what's really important at that level. So that's the process, that's what we're working towards. And now I want to definitely say thanks again to Bill Pierce for hosting us. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And I wanted to open it up for any questions or any discussion.
Clarification.
Yes.
You want us to write beside our name what area
Yes.
associated with?
Right. So, whatever neighborhood you happen to identify with, where you live, where your business is, or all of them. You can put all of them in there. Any questions?
I'm going to move around and, because some of the tables don't have maps, and I'm going to steal them from those that have finished putting down where they are connected.
We have a map here if you need it.
You're done with yours?
How are you? Good. It's good to see you guys. Did you guys need a map? Yeah. There you go. You bet.
He's an extra paper.
What's that?
Hey, how are you? My name is David James, and me and my friends here at the table represent Revival Productions, a brand new theater production company that is in the Gordon Literacy Center. Now, for the 1.5 of you who have heard of it, the other percentage just proves the fact that we could use a little help with marketing. So that's one of the things I am so proud to see on your agenda. But my question is, how do we as a nonprofit who's growing in the arts that have only existed for 9 months, but yet I've already put on 3 different shows, I believe. We've got another one a week from Friday, and it's all about teens next Friday. We've had youth just a couple of weeks ago, and we've got some great things on store. How do we raise our hand and say, not only that we're here, but we could use a little help? How do we do that since we're just getting the ball rolling?
Yeah.
Where do we go?
Well, I would say one thing, I'd be happy to meet with you. I've been raising funds for 100 years, it seems like. But I'd be happy to meet with you and give you some ideas. And as far as getting the information out there, we are going to be using, or are, a website that can start to put those kind of activities on there. Because one of the big things is that people don't have one place to go to actually find out what's going on all around the community. And invariably, you could be here 19 years and somebody will say, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't hear that. Yeah, so that's important. But I'd be happy to sit down
Great,
with you.
thank you. I will take you up on that.
I know you will.
Okay.
That's Mr. Pulaski.
Regina,
Yes.
for some time I've been talking to a couple people about starting a weekly newspaper here in Coatesville. You gave me the name of the paper just a few minutes ago called Our Community. That is what Coatesville needs. The websites are good, very good. I don't understand websites. I'm old, but I think we can use something like that.
Yeah. And that is a problem because a lot of us, my family, and it's a big family, the younger people took over orchestrating the family reunion. And they send out all the notices by email. And all the older folks in our family say, huh? What are you talking about? So it's almost like you need both, because some people don't access the internet in that way. Another thing is that there are places like here, I believe, and other places, the library, that will help you to get on the internet and to get comfortable with looking up things. Now, some of us at an older age don't want to do that, but some people do. They're actually asking for it, and the library is trying to respond to that. So, and senior centers as well. Any other questions? I know you're not going to let us off the hook that fast.
Comments, thoughts?
Comments?
Circulation.
I have a question, like, once you get your website up, that's kind of trying to bring together, and I know it's this partly this Growing Greater website that I haven't been to recently, I have to admit. Will there be like a suggestions or comment section, like, you know, like if I know a group that you might want to connect with, is there a way I could let you know?
There, on both of our pages, Second Century Alliance and the Growing Greater, there's a contact us, and there's a
Okay.
field where you can fill something in right now, that comes directly to me.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
whatever you have, you know,
Yeah.
just pop it in there.
Okay, all right.
What's the Growing Greater website name?
CoatesvillegrowingGreater.org. It's actually on the bottom of the programs. They
I have
might,
this
they
one,
might,
26.
that's the Second Century, right?
This one right here.
There you go.
Okay, very good. Now I have it.
No comments? No questions?
I see a light.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you mind providing an update about the revitalization development kinds of things that are happening? I think there's some misinformation kind of floating out there, and I know there's more happening behind the scenes than what may be showing up.
Rest assured, while you see a vacant lot, there's work going on.
Absolutely.
No real estate project goes in a heartbeat. So, all right, so we'll start with the intersection. The intersection of First Avenue and Lincoln Highway is slated to go to construction the end of this month, September sometime, so that will start. They're going to realign it, so it's a little more pedestrian friendly, a little more easy to navigate from a vehicular perspective. And that should take through the course of over the winter and hopefully be completed by the spring. So then we'll move east to Gateway project. The construction is probably slated for spring 2019. He's still working on his financing package, but he has every intention of starting the rehabilitation of the Cultural Society building. We are in an application process for an economic development liquor license for that building, and as soon as we get some word that that has been approved, they'll bring in a sports bar. They're soliciting a sports bar franchise for that building. So for the Cultural Society building. And we are also actively working with him to recruit a dining option, some sort of fine dining restaurant for the bank building. So that developer owns the bank building across the street too. Moving east, we are working with the city engineer to design new streetscape from First Avenue to hopefully 4th, but probably 3rd. So that'll include new curbs, sidewalks, trees, real trees. And so we're hoping that will commence next year. And 3rd Avenue will be completed in the next couple of months, so you'll see the striping on the street, you'll see the striping on the Olivet parking lot. That will soon be open to commuters to use the train station. Department of Community Development has awarded us some funds to actually make some improvements to the exterior of the historic train station building. So we're going to kind of clean that up, put some faux window panels on it, and make it a little less of an eyesore as we finish 3rd Avenue. We are rolling into 4th Avenue streetscape improvement because, for those of you who don't know, the new train station is planned for the corner of 4th Avenue and Fleetwood. So we got 2 streetscapes out of it, right, out of the deal. We got the new streetscape on 3rd Avenue, And by the end of next year, we will have the 4th Avenue streetscape done. We've also received some funds from the Department of Community Development at the county to extend the streetscape improvements south on 3rd Avenue. So now with new City Hall, we'll have a new streetscape on 3rd Avenue that goes from Fleetwood down to Harmony. Train station. 3rd Avenue will be completed this year, 4th Avenue next year, and we are still working with PennDOT on the design of the platforms. But we're hearing good news. I can't share, but we're hearing good news.
Been hearing that for
I know that.
years now.
I know that, but this is not an if, it's a when. It's a when. When you have PennDOT and Amtrak, and you have federal funds, and you have all these layers, it does take a long time. But it's a when, not an if.
That's good.
Did I cover those? And I don't know if you want to cover it. Oh, the flats, yes. Well, that's public knowledge. There is actually a proposal on the table for the flats. It's a multi-use sports facility. So this is a multi-sport indoor and outdoor fields and courts that would attract the competitions, the sporting competitions in volleyball and soccer and basketball and cheerleading from all over the Mid-Atlantic. So that's a proposal that's on the table, and right now it's in negotiations for the land, and they're talking to the redevelopment authority who owns the property.
I think you can give them the land for free.
You think so? I'll let them know. I'll pass that along. What do you think, Linda? What do you think, Linda?
I think it was a
Yes, sir.
While you're on rumors of redevelopment,
Yes.
supposedly the city is planning on putting a amphitheater in at the Gateway Park. Can you elaborate on that? There is nothing in their budget on it, but I understand they have spent money, gone to court, had deed restrictions on properties changed and et cetera. So obviously they must have something going on, and I understand they have drawings of some sort, but there's been nothing really publicly made available to the
Yeah, and
citizens.
I don't have the details on that. I can defer if you're interested in addressing it.
Putting an amphitheater at the intersection. That's true, that's not a rumor.
Okay, but I just mean, there's been nothing really publicly, I'm hearing this through back channels, but nothing's been
Well,
publicly announced.
if you would come to our council meetings, we don't do things behind the scenes. Everything is up front and public to whomever chooses to attend. All the information is laid out, the proposal was made there. So, yes, there will be one coming very soon. And we're excited about it.
Yeah, so are we.
So
So are we. We're excited.
In the meantime, sir, you can check out Revival Productions. We're bringing in paid professional actors and opportunities for jobs in the city and economic growth because of patrons coming to our theater. Lots of wonderful productions in the works. So please check us out.
Do you have a website?
Revival-productions.com.
Okay.
Do you mail to churches, like send information to churches?
We can absolutely do that. This is our marketing guy, but we'll talk to you about it later.
Come on, marketing guy.
He's the best.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
It sounds like a town manager, only it's not just connected to the city. You know what I mean?
The
We
community
used to
organizer
have
position.
a Town manager, there was actually a building, a store front.
Oh, a downtown manager.
Downtown.
So that's a great foray. So let me give you, since I have your attention, let me give you a little brief on the Second Century Alliance. And you have the flyers around there. Back in 2015, there were about 18 community stakeholders led by Regina Lewis, who came together in Coatesville. And if you're on the board, raise your hand, because there are a number of you here. They came together in 2015 when the city celebrated its 100th anniversary as a third-class city. And their goal was to make sure that Coatesville's second century was economically prosperous, right? Not just for businesses and industry, but for the residents as well. At the same time, Chester County was working on its Vista 2025, which is their long-term comprehensive plan, with a focus on its urban centers and a focus on the city of Coatesville. And so those two groups, Chester County, Vista 2025, the county commissioners, and the Second Century Alliance stakeholders came together in true public-private partnership. And you can see the list of board members on that flyer. And they decided that they were going to hire a community and economic development professional. That's me. So 2.5 years ago, I started here working as staff to the Second Century Alliance. Now, I say all that to give you the context, to say that a lot of what I've been doing is kind of laying the foundation. We've been working with the volunteers to establish this strategy, this 5-year plan. We've been working to get the community organizer funding for the residential neighborhoods. And the reason I bring all this up is because we are also working towards a grant to hire a downtown manager. So ultimately, and fingers crossed by the end of this year, thanks to a lot of work from some of the people in this room, we will have full complement at the Second Century Alliance. So I'll be working on the broader economic development, the jobs, the economic opportunity, the industry, the real estate development. We'll have this community organizer working in the residential neighborhoods, and we'll have a downtown manager focused specifically and exclusively on the commercial core. Okay?
Yeah, like in Phoenixville, all the stuff they did, Barry Cassidy was a downtown manager and did all that.
Right.
He's way beyond our pay scale now. Downtown, kind of the downtown manager for Coatesville now.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but-
So it
but-
would, we
but
need
you can do
a
lot.
person with their foot on the gas all the time. and
Yeah,
that-
you can do a lot.
So that's what we're working
They
towards.
He can't do a lot if she can do a lot.
Right. Yes.
Can I put a plug in for 30 West?
Sure, absolutely.
So I'm Kathy Swanson. I work with Avis & Young. I'm a commercial real estate agent, and I do not live in the community. However, my associate Scott Williams and I are working with the Pulver Corporation to develop the ground on Route 82 right next to the Marriott. So we're planning 3 20,000 square foot buildings, commercial buildings, but we're open to, it could be one 60,000 square foot building, it could be 140 and 120. We're open to anything. We're hoping to maybe get a medical facility or a school or a restaurant or a combination of multiple things. So we are open to suggestions. We are casting a wide net. I'm sorry? Youth Center. Youth Center? We're casting a wide net, and I think there's a lot of latitude with what can be built there. So,
What's the name of your organization?
our company's Avis & Young, and we're working with the Oliver Tyrone Pulver Corporation, who's doing development. They are credited widely with turning around Conshohocken, really putting Conshohocken on the map. They built all of the tower buildings right along the river, the Schuylkill River, really turned Conshohocken around, revitalized it, and hoping to become, part of the same community here. So, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Anybody else?
I think I have a little concern about the timeliness of the restaurant and the Cultural Society opening, in addition to the sports complex, and I know even our theater, because I don't see right now Coatesville being a place that could sustain a restaurant like that with nothing else to do. There's nothing really attracting people into the city. In fact, for my camp, I just had a parent who's lived in Chester County over 20 years, and she said she had never been to Coatesville. So I think I have some concern, because I'd hate to see a restaurant go in and then fizzle out because either a plan falls through or the timeliness just isn't right. So is there any kind of cushion or any other endeavors going on that will help to support that restaurant and just continue to get patrons in, because the reality is that not everybody can go out with their family and have a $50 meal one night of the week. So I think that that's a big concern of mine, because the last thing we want is another empty building.
Right, you're absolutely right, and that's a great concern. What we would have is 3 restaurants opening at one time, because you have a little mini critical mass in your downtown, which is why we're working so hard to get somebody for the bank building, because we don't want that restaurant, that sports bar opening up in a vacuum. But we are working with the developer to make sure that we're marketing not just to the Coatesville residents, but the drive time, the 10-minute drive time. And I've talked to residents up in Hillview and Millview who have made it very clear that they want a product down here. So we also have a gentleman, a developer out of Philadelphia, who purchased the Lipkins warehouse building. And that's the tall 7-story brick building on Chestnut Street right behind the Cultural Society. And he's been cleaning that out. If you drive by there, he's been cleaning that out. And he's got some plans for that too. So we're hoping that we can get 1 or 2 just to start that domino falling. But that's a very valid concern. John?
Sonia, I think one of our problems here in Coatesville, my problem is I lived here all my life. And I'm 84 years old. I lived 2 blocks away from where I was born. I built one of the best houses to be built in Coatesville 55 years ago, my wife and I. My problem is I remember Coatesville as it used to be. When I tell people that Coatesville was the hub of Chester County and Westchester was simply a dot at the end of a sentence, they don't believe it. That's true. There was a time on Christmas week you could not walk on the sidewalks of Coatesville, but you only look backwards if that's where you want to go. What I'm saying is Coatesville does not promote itself. We have a bypass, Coatesville downtown bypass. People say, what happened to Coatesville? What was the downfall? I could tell you, but this meeting is not for that. I could tell you what happened, and people blaming on a few things. I believe there should be signs on Coatesville downtown bypass. Visit historic Coatesville, the country's oldest steel mill, which is something. It's not an attraction, but if you put on there the best Mexican food in Chester County, every restaurant in Coatesville has everything but Polish cooking. Another point. Give them a reason to make that turn onto South Route 82 and to visit the gazebos on the Riverwalk. So I think Coatesville is missing the boat on that. Hey, turn here. How many times we go halfway across the country on the internet and you don't see a thing? All you see is trees, no little towns anymore. So we could do a lot if we want to do it.
That's a good point, and there's other things that are in the works that we aren't directing, such as and we've heard this a long time, the Steel Museum. But they are truly pushing and working hard on that. And that's another possible attraction.
Exactly.
Yeah. And as far as marketing is concerned, you're right. You don't visibly see it, but I can tell you that there's been a lot of marketing going on behind the scenes, which is why the people who are looking at the flats came here, because they really weren't in tune to Coatesville. So putting that word out there that number one, Coatesville is a great place to invest in. Coatesville's a great place to live. Coatesville people are working together to make things happen. Building the excitement about Coatesville. And we do know that among developers and investors, we are hearing that Coatesville is being brought up almost everywhere you go. And that's a good thing, but that's just the beginning. And you're right, there's a lot to be marketed yet about our great community that I fell in love with when I came here in '94. And it wasn't what you described. But there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of excitement here. And if we can stay on that track of working together to push things forward, we're going to get there.
I just wanted to mention that the hotel, the Marriott,
Yes.
we have, speaking for the church that I'm a part of, our denomination, we have like 4 conferences a year. And I'm on the arrangements of that. And typically, when I get calls of people coming out of town, mainly Reading, Lancaster, Coatesville was the halfway spot. A lot of what we do is in King of Prussia at the casino, because they have all the convention space.
Yeah.
People need rooms. They don't want to stay down there.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a group of rooms at the Marriott. It's always packed. And that's a good thing. But as we're thinking about that development, I think we need to think about more rooms and or conference space, because we are constantly challenged to even bring a conference. And we have 4 a year, which take up maybe 200-300 rooms. And we're constantly driving that. Camp Hill, King of Prussia, and places, and that's a lot of money. And we have one this week. I'm driving back and forth. And a lot of people are interested in coming to Coatesville. So that's just
Great comment. Thank you.
I've noted that.
And we're glad that the Marriott has that problem right now, because when we first built it, there was concern, were we going to be able to fill those rooms? And I know I belong to a number of different organizations, and we hold the small gatherings there. The Newland Foundation and CAP holds their meetings there, and it is tough to get space, and that's why we're so grateful to the Senior Center for tonight. But it is, but it is tough. Yeah, thank you.
Talk to Don Poole.
How about it?
We just did.
Well, I would encourage you to hang around for a short time if you want to chat with each other, because we're not going to hold up our staff here that's been so kind as to host us, and or talk with one of us if you would like. And we'll be respectful of your time for the evening, and thank you again for coming out. Appreciate it.